Welcome back to LPBW Update, your only reliable source for the truth behind the reality TV edit. We need to talk about what is arguably the most scandalous event to ever hit Roloff Farms, a situation that is developing rapidly and has left fans absolutely reeling. If you have been following the recent trajectory of the show, you know that Amy Roloff has been trying to carve out her own identity, separate from the farm's pumpkin season and separate from Matt's looming control. This charity gala was supposed to be her magnum opus. This was her moment. We are hearing from sources close to the production that this event was not just a fundraiser, it was a statement. Amy wanted to prove that she could utilize the property, which, remember, is still partly her history and her legacy, to do something good, something purely for the community, specifically to raise awareness for dwarfism. The setup for this tragedy, and I do call it a tragedy because of the intent behind it, began weeks ago. Insider reports suggest that the tension on the farm was palpable, but not in the way you might expect. Usually we see Matt steamrolling Amy, changing plans at the last minute or moving structures without asking. But this time, something was different. Sources indicate that Matt Roloff was actually surprisingly supportive of Amy's gala. Whether this was a PR move to clean up his image after the chaotic farm sale negotiations or a genuine moment of nostalgia, we don't know yet. But we have heard that Matt was offering logistical support, helping with tent placement, and even offering up some of the farm's vintage equipment for photo ops. Now, pause for a second and think about how that looks to Caryn. For years, the narrative has been that Caryn is the one who manages Matt, the one who keeps the chaos in check. Suddenly, Amy is back in the spotlight on the farm, and Matt is playing the role of the helpful ex-husband. According to exclusive theories circulating among those close to the family, this dynamic did not sit well with the current lady of the manor. We have heard whispers that Caryn was seen multiple times during the planning phase, watching from the porch of the double-wide or pacing near the big house, visibly agitated. When Matt would come back from helping Amy with the layout, the mood in the big house allegedly turned ice cold. This brings us to the day of the event. By all accounts, it was shaping up to be a spectacular evening. We're talking about high-profile donors, local celebrities, and people traveling from across the state to support Amy's cause. The tents were pristine. The lighting was perfect. It was one of those rare Oregon evenings where the rain held off and the farm looked like the golden paradise we remember from the early seasons. Amy was glowing. If you look at the social media snippets that surfaced before the crackdown, she looked lighter, happier, and more in her element than she has in years. She wasn't fighting for space, she was holding court. But while the guests were arriving and the champagne was being poured, there was a different energy brewing just a few hundred yards away. While Amy was greeting donors, sources claim Caryn was observing everything with a hawk's eye. We have heard reports that earlier in the day, Caryn made offhanded comments to production staff and even to Matt about safety concerns. Phrases like, "I hope they have the insurance for this," or "It looks like way too many people for that permit," were allegedly dropped into casual conversation. At the time, it seemed like typical Caryn nagging, just her way of asserting control or feigning concern. But looking back now, with the information we have, those comments feel like foreshadowing. They feel like a justification for what was about to happen. The event kicked off at 6 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., the gala was in full swing. The speeches were emotional, the donations were starting to pledge, and the atmosphere was electric. Then, the tone shifted. It started with a rumble in the distance, the distinct, heavy sound of diesel engines that weren't farm tractors. Then came the lights, blue and red strobe lights cutting through the ambient string lighting of the party tents. It wasn't just a patrol car, it was the fire marshal's command unit, flanked by local law enforcement. Imagine the confusion. The music cut out, the murmur of the crowd went from celebratory to concerned. Amy, who was in the middle of a conversation with a major donor, froze. You have to understand the humiliation of this moment. This wasn't a noise complaint. This was a raid. The fire marshal marched directly toward the main tent, bypassing security. Amy rushed to intercept them, her face reportedly turning pale. We are told that Chris Marek, ever the protector, was right by her side, trying to de-escalate the situation, asking to see the warrant, asking to see the reasoning. The fire marshal's declaration was loud enough for half the party to hear. We received an urgent complaint regarding immediate safety hazards and severe capacity violations. We are shutting this down effective immediately. The air went out of the room. A capacity violation? On a farm that hosts thousands of people during pumpkin season? Let's look at the logic here, because this is where the theory of sabotage starts to solidify into fact. Roloff Farms is zoned and permitted for massive crowds. They have parking for hundreds. They have infrastructure for festivals. The idea that a charity gala, which is significantly smaller than a Saturday in October, would trigger a legitimate capacity hazard is laughable. It doesn't make sense on paper. Amy was reportedly in tears, pleading with the officers, trying to show them the clicker counts from the entrance, proving they were under the limit. But when the authorities get a call that uses specific buzzwords, words like blocked exits, fire hazard, and imminent danger, they don't negotiate. They clear the area first and ask questions later. The embarrassment was total. Donors were being ushered to their cars. The food was left untouched. The silence that fell over the farm wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with confusion and anger. And where was the rest of the family during this catastrophe? That is the question everyone is asking. While Amy was humiliated in front of her community, eyewitnesses state that the lights in the big house were on. Figures were seen on the porch. And this is where the narrative gets dark. We are hearing that Caryn wasn't hiding. She wasn't inside avoiding the drama. Allegedly, she was standing on the deck, arms crossed, watching the police lights dismantle Amy's dream. Some might say this is just speculation, that perhaps it was a neighbor tired of the noise. But we have dug into the geography of the farm. The gala was held deep on the property. The nearest public road is a distance away. The nearest neighbor is not close enough to assess capacity limits or blocked exits visually. To know that the tent was overcrowded, even if it was a lie, you had to be looking at it. You had to have a line of sight. And who has the best line of sight to the event grounds? The big house. The timing is also incredibly suspicious. The call came in right as the event hit its peak, right when the donation pledges were about to start. If you wanted to hurt the fundraising efforts the most, you wouldn't call at 5 p.m. while people were parking. You wouldn't call at 9 p.m. when people were leaving. You would call exactly when the emotional momentum was highest to pop the balloon. That requires knowledge of the schedule. That requires watching. As the guests filed out, confused and whispering, the reality of the financial hit started to set in. This wasn't just about pride. This was about thousands of dollars for a good cause potentially evaporating because someone decided to weaponize the bureaucracy. Amy was reportedly inconsolable, feeling that she had failed the organization and failed the community. Chris was furious, pacing the perimeter, already on the phone with their legal counsel. But the real twist, the piece of the puzzle that turns this from a bad night into a full-blown family war, is what happened in the immediate aftermath. As the police were wrapping up, ensuring the venue was cleared, the fire marshal made a comment that slipped through the chaos. When Chris demanded to know who made the call, hoping to confront a neighbor, the official hesitated. They usually protect the anonymity of the caller. But in the heat of the moment, perhaps feeling bad for the crying woman in the gala dress, the officer dropped a hint that blew the case wide open. He didn't say it was a neighbor. He didn't say it was a passerby. He allegedly indicated that the complaint came from a resident of the property who claimed to fear for the safety of their home due to the crowd. Let that sink in. A resident of the property. There are only two people who reside on that property who aren't Amy and Chris, Matt and Caryn. This revelation changes the entire complexion of the evening. If the call came from the property, it means it was an inside job. It means someone looked out their window, saw Amy succeeding, saw the farm looking beautiful under her direction, and decided to burn it down. And knowing what we know about Matt's recent behavior, his desire to be the good guy, his support during the setup, It makes very little sense for him to sabotage an event he helped build. He loves the glory. He would want to take credit for the success, not ruin it. That leaves one person who has historically felt threatened by Amy's presence. One person who has reportedly been seething over the fact that Amy and Matt were getting along for this event. One person who has access to the landlines in the big house and knows exactly what to say to a fire marshal to get a lights and sirens response. We are just getting started. What happens next involves a confrontation that has been years in the making. We have reports of Chris Marek going into full investigation mode, pulling permit records that prove the capacity claim was a lie, and Amy finally connecting the dots. The investigation that follows the shutdown is where the true colors of the Roloff farm dynamic are exposed. If you thought the shutdown of the gala was the climax of this story, you are wrong. The shutdown was just the trigger. What happened in the 48 hours following that disastrous night is where the real story lives. This is where the mask slips. This is where the happy blended family narrative that TLC tries to push completely disintegrates. We are moving into the investigation phase, and the details we have uncovered regarding the aftermath of the raid paint a disturbing picture of calculated malice. The morning after the gala, the farm was reportedly silent, eerily silent. Usually after a big event, there is a buzz of cleanup, people debriefing, the energy of a job well done. Instead, sources describe a scene of devastation. The tents were still up, flapping in the wind, a grim reminder of the night before. Amy Roloff was reportedly holed up in her home, absolutely crushed. We are talking about a woman who spent months planning this, not for profit, but for charity, only to be treated like a criminal in front of her peers. But while Amy was grieving the loss of the event, Chris Marek was getting to work. We have to give credit where credit is due. Chris often gets a bad rap for being a bit stiff or awkward on camera, but in this situation, his background in real estate and his methodical nature became Amy's greatest weapon. Chris didn't just accept the fire marshal's ruling. He didn't just say, "Oh well, bad luck." He smelled a rat. According to exclusive information from our sources, the very next morning, Chris went straight to the county clerk's office. He wasn't looking for an apology, he was looking for the paperwork. Here is the smoking gun. We have seen copies of the permit applications for the farm's events. The permit Amy secured for the gala was a Class B assembly permit. This allows for a capacity of up to 500 guests, provided there are clearly marked exits and fire extinguishers present. The guest list for the gala? It was capped at 250. Even with staff and caterers, the total head count was well under 300 people. They weren't just under capacity, they were at barely 60% of what the law allows. When Chris presented this to the fire marshal's office, demanding an explanation for the shutdown, the narrative shifted. The authorities admitted that the visual inspection suggested overcrowding, but they were acting primarily on the urgent nature of the complaint. They claimed the caller specified that exits were being blocked by temporary fencing, a claim that was objectively false. The fencing was standard crowd control, installed by professionals. This wasn't a mistake. This was a lie designed to trigger an emergency response. Chris reportedly pressed the issue. He asked the question that unlocked everything. Who made the call? Now, normally 911 calls or non-emergency tip lines are anonymous to the public. However, because this resulted in a significant financial loss and a potential lawsuit for wrongful termination of an event, the details started to leak. The fire marshal didn't give a name, but he gave a descriptor that narrowed the suspect pool down to a single household. He reiterated that the caller identified themselves as a resident of the property who was fearful of the liability. Let's break down the term resident. In the eyes of the law, and in the context of Roloff Farms, a resident is someone whose primary dwelling is on that tax lot. That isn't a neighbor down the road. That isn't a guest. That is someone living in the big house. This information was brought back to Amy, and for the first time, the sadness turned to rage. But there was a catch. Matt Roloff is a resident, and Matt Roloff has a history of being controlling about safety and liability. It was entirely possible, in Amy's mind, that Matt saw the crowd, panicked about his insurance premiums, and made the call to protect his assets. For about 6 hours, the heat was entirely on Matt. We are told that Amy and Chris went to the big house for a confrontation that was not filmed by TLC cameras. This was raw. This was real. Amy accused Matt of sabotaging her moment out of jealousy or control. She allegedly laid into him, asking how he could be so two-faced, helping her set up the tents one day and calling the police the next. But here is where the exclusive theory takes a sharp turn. Matt Roloff, for all his faults, was reportedly blindsided by the accusation. Sources say he was genuinely confused and immediately defensive. And for once, his defense held water. Matt had an alibi. During the time the call was placed, which logs show was exactly 7:15 p.m., Matt was not in the house. He was actually seen down by the tractor barn talking to the parking attendants and was captured in the background of a guest's live stream on social media. We have reviewed the footage. At 7:15 p.m., Matt Roloff is visible outside, holding a drink, chatting with a donor. He is nowhere near a landline. If Matt didn't make the call and he was the only Roloff resident in the big house, that leaves only one other person who claims residency, lives in that house, and has access to the phone: Caryn Chandler. This brings us to the most explosive part of our investigation: the phone records. Matt, desperate to clear his name because Amy was threatening to take this public and ruin the farm's reputation permanently, reportedly did the unthinkable. He pulled the digital call logs for the farm's landline. You have to understand, Matt is a data guy. He has cameras everywhere. He tracks everything. Pulling a phone log is nothing to him. According to leaks from within the production team who were privy to the aftermath, the log showed an outgoing call to the local non-emergency dispatch line at 7:15 p.m. The duration was 4 minutes. The call originated from the master suite of the big house. At 7:15 p.m., while Matt was outside playing the gracious host, Caryn was unaccounted for. She wasn't at the party. She wasn't on the porch. She was inside. We need to talk about the psychology of Caryn here. Why would she do this? Why go to such lengths? Our deep dive analysis suggests this wasn't just petty jealousy. It was a strategic move to assert dominance. Amy was winning. Amy was looking like the matriarch again. The donors were fawning over her. The community was rallying around her. And most importantly, Matt was getting along with her. For someone like Caryn, who entered the picture effectively as the new management, seeing the old management succeed on the same turf is a threat. If Amy's gala is a success, she does another one next year. She keeps a foothold on the farm. She stays relevant in Matt's daily orbit. By calling the authorities and framing it as a liability issue, Caryn kills two birds with one stone. First, she humiliates Amy and ensures the event is a failure. Second, she frames it as protecting Matt. If she got caught, she could claim she was just worried about Matt's insurance, that she was looking out for his best interests because he was too nice to stop the overcrowding himself. It is the ultimate manipulation tactic, sabotage disguised as concern. But she didn't count on Chris Marek's persistence. She didn't count on the permit being bulletproof, and she certainly didn't count on Matt checking the phone logs. The atmosphere in the big house when this revelation came to light was described by insiders as nuclear. We are hearing reports of a shouting match that echoed across the property. Matt, who usually defends Caryn to the ends of the earth, was reportedly cornered. He was staring at the proof that his girlfriend had lied to the police, lied to him, and actively destroyed a charity event that benefited a cause, dwarfism awareness, that is central to his own identity and his children's lives. That is a line you do not cross. We also have to consider the anonymous complaint aspect. The caller tried to stay anonymous, but by identifying as a resident, Caryn played a card she thought gave her authority. She thought saying, "I live here," would make the police act faster. And she was right. It worked. But that same arrogance is what caught her. If she had just said, "I'm a concerned neighbor," the police might have driven by slowly. But "I am a resident" forced the fire marshal to enter the property. It was a tactical error born of entitlement. Now, let's look at the fallout before the final confrontation. Amy is sitting with this information. She knows. Chris knows. Matt knows. And Caryn knows that they know. But Caryn, being the master spinner that she is, didn't immediately confess. We are hearing that she attempted to gaslight the entire situation. Sources suggest she tried to claim that maybe one of the kids made the call, or that the phone lines were glitched. She tried to throw anyone under the bus to avoid taking responsibility. But the kids weren't there. Jeremy and Zach were at their own homes. Jacob wasn't on the property. The list of suspects was one person long. The tension was building toward a breaking point. Amy, armed with the knowledge that her ex-husband's partner deliberately sabotaged her charity work, had a decision to make. She could quietly resent it, or she could expose it. And this is where the new Amy shines. The old Amy might have rolled her eyes and complained in a confessional. The new Amy, emboldened by Chris and fueled by the injustice done to her donors, decided she wasn't going to let this slide. She realized that the event was ruined. Yes, the night was over, but the narrative wasn't over. She still had the donors' emails. She still had the community's attention. And she realized that if she could prove the sabotage, or at least confront the saboteur, she could turn this PR nightmare into a rallying cry. The stage was set for what we are calling the showdown on the porch. It wasn't about cameras anymore. It was about respect. Amy and Chris made the call to go back to the big house, not to ask questions this time, but to deliver a verdict. They had the permit. They had the alibi. They had the timeline. And they were ready to look Caryn in the eye and ask her why she hated Amy enough to call the police on a fundraiser for dwarfism. This leads us to the final act of this saga. You might think Matt would kick Caryn out. You might think Caryn would apologize. But what actually happens when Amy walks up those steps with the evidence in hand is far more shocking and reveals the true power dynamics of the Roloff family. We have arrived at the final, most explosive chapter of this saga. If the shutdown was the crime and the investigation was the evidence, this is the trial and the verdict. We are back at the big house, where the air is thick enough to cut with a knife. Amy Roloff and Chris Marek are walking up the steps, not as the defeated ex-wife and the new husband, but as the victors in a game of 4D chess that Caryn Chandler didn't even realize she was losing. According to exclusive insider reports, the confrontation that took place on that porch was unlike anything we have seen on the show. Usually, these arguments are circular. Matt talks over Amy, Amy gets frustrated, and nothing changes. But this time, Amy had the leverage. She had the permit proving she was legal, and she had the timeline proving Matt was innocent, which left Caryn exposed. Sources indicate that when Amy presented the information, that the call came from the residence at 7:15 p.m. while Matt was outside, Caryn's demeanor shifted instantly. She reportedly went from feigning ignorance to defensive justification in the blink of an eye. We are hearing that Caryn finally admitted to placing the call, but the spin she put on it was masterful in its toxicity. She allegedly told Matt, right in front of Amy, that she did it for him. She claimed she was terrified that the crowd would trample the landscaping or that a guest would trip and sue the farm, effectively bankrupting Matt. She tried to frame her act of sabotage as an act of protection. She played the martyr. She said she was the only one looking out for the business, while Matt was too busy playing Mr. Popular with the donors. But for the first time in a long time, Matt Roloff reportedly didn't buy it. And this is crucial for the future of the show. Matt is a businessman first and a boyfriend second. He knows that having a charity event shut down by the police on your own property is a PR nightmare. It makes the farm look unsafe. It makes the Roloffs look disorganized. And most importantly, it makes them look petty. When he realized that Caryn, his partner, the woman he trusts to manage his life, intentionally brought law enforcement onto the property to humiliate the mother of his children, something snapped. Insiders describe Matt as furious. He reportedly told Caryn that she had overstepped her bounds. This wasn't just about a squabble between exes. This was about the Roloff brand. By calling the fire marshal, she didn't just hurt Amy. She hurt the farm's reputation as a venue. This is the wedge we have been waiting for. This is the moment where Matt realizes that Caryn's jealousy of Amy might actually be a liability to his empire. But the real victory belongs to Amy. In the past, Amy might have let this destroy her. She might have retreated. Instead, she took this ammunition and used it to turn the tide. Amy and Chris left the big house that night, not with an apology, because we know Caryn never apologizes, but with the truth. And Amy knew exactly how to use it. The next morning, the victory phase began. Amy didn't go on a rant. She didn't name names. She did something smarter. She sent out a massive update to her donor list and posted a video to her social media followers. She explained that the event was shut down due to a malicious and false report regarding capacity. She showed the permit. She showed the empty space in the tents. She controlled the narrative. She made it clear that someone wanted the event to fail, but she wouldn't let that happen. The response was instantaneous. The story of the police raid on a dwarfism charity event went viral in the local community. People were outraged. The donors who were ushered out of the tent didn't ask for refunds. Instead, when they heard that Amy had been targeted by a false report, their sympathy turned into generosity. We have confirmed that in the 48 hours following the shutdown, donations to Amy's charity didn't just meet the goal, they doubled it. People who hadn't even attended the event started donating online. The comment section was flooded with support for Amy and Chris. The narrative flipped completely. Instead of being the disorganized organizer who got shut down, Amy became the resilient hero fighting against the odds. The sabotage backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Caryn wanted to humiliate Amy and starve the fundraiser. Instead, she made Amy a martyr and caused the fundraiser to break records. This is the ultimate revenge. Success. Amy didn't have to scream at Caryn to win. She just had to succeed in spite of herself. And the numbers don't lie. The charity gala is now being hailed as one of the most successful fundraising efforts Amy has ever led, precisely because of the controversy that surrounded it. Meanwhile, back at the big house, the fallout is still settling. We are hearing whispers that the dynamic between Matt and Caryn has shifted permanently. Matt is embarrassed. He hates looking like he has lost control of his own property. The fact that the police were called on his own land, by his own girlfriend, against his own ex-wife, makes him look weak. It makes him look like he can't manage his own household. Sources suggest that discussions about the wedding have stalled. Matt is reportedly reconsidering how much access Caryn should have to the farm's operations if she is going to weaponize them for personal vendettas. And let's not forget the kids. Zach and Tori, who have been distant from the farm, reportedly heard about the incident and were disgusted. This act of sabotage confirms everything they have felt about the toxic environment at the big house. It pushes the family further apart, sure, but it also vindicates everyone who warned Matt that Caryn was playing a game. Jeremy and Audrey, who usually stay out of the drama, have notably liked Amy's post about the fundraiser's success, sending a silent signal of where their loyalty lies. So, where does this leave us? Amy Roloff has emerged from the ashes of a ruined evening stronger than ever. She has proven that she doesn't need the farm's permission to be successful, and she certainly doesn't need Caryn's approval. She has Chris, she has her integrity, and she has a community that sees the truth. Caryn, on the other hand, is left standing on the porch of the big house, having played her ace card and lost. She exposed herself as the villain in a story she thought she was writing. This isn't just a TV show plot point, this is a revelation of character. The permit police didn't shut down Amy Roloff, they unlocked her potential. And the anonymous call didn't hide the truth. It shined a spotlight directly on the jealousy rotting the core of the Roloff family dynamic. We will be watching closely to see if Matt finally takes action or if he sweeps this under the rug like everything else. But one thing is for certain, Amy knows, the fans know, and now you know. The call came from inside the house, but the victory belongs to the woman who was kicked out of it. That brings us to the end of this deep dive. This story is a testament to resilience and a warning about the lengths people will go to when they feel threatened by someone else's light. Now I want to hear from you. This is the most controversial theory we have ever covered, and I need to know where you stand. Do you think Matt will actually hold Caryn accountable for ruining the event? Or will he let her talk her way out of it again? And more importantly, if you had been there, would you have donated double just to spite the haters? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. If you think what Caryn did was unforgivable and you support Amy's victory lap, I want you to comment Team Amy in all caps. Let's flood the comment section and show the algorithm whose side we are on. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more exclusive investigations into the reality behind the reality show, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, keep watching the background, because that's where the real story happens.